welcome everyone. If you don't know, this talk will be in English, so but questions later on can be made in Portuguese if you like. You can always translate. We have here a bit of a complex setting. It's supposed to be a simplified streaming, but I hope everything is working now. But I wanted to welcome everyone. We have a few people online already watching. Thank you for coming. This is supposed to be an end of the year kind of presentations from 2024 for our projects. So I'm going to go kind of present a few things that we did first and present the project and what we are about. And I have to just a second. I can hear some extra sounds from here. And what's the topic about and why are we here? Well, basically, the PdBA Lisboa was born in 2022. And I like to describe it as an artistic and curatorial project, very broad, very open, and that through online platforms and channels host exhibitions, online exhibitions, workshops, talks, also artist residencies and commission artworks. And this is because I like to keep, for now, the concept very open, as I see thinking about art institutions as always in a learning process, always in development. This is part of my research, personal research, and I also wanted to bring this to this project. But basically, well, first of all, we borrow this concept of the Palácio das Belas Artes, or the Fine Arts Palace, from a project from Vienna for the PdBA Wien. And we have here Bernard and Seth, who's going to present us a little bit more about their project that has been happening since 2014, 15. First with Bernard, and then Seth can talk a little bit more about their collection as well. And we borrow from them this format where we kind of take over or borrow or appropriate. There's a lot of words and concepts to discuss about this. An existing physical building that we don't own, that we thought was worth actually addressing or borrowing from, right? In the case of the PdBA in Lisbon, I found this building, this Palacio. You can see some shadows of it here. I'm going to present a little bit more. Near the Faculty of Fine Arts. So it also became known as the Palácio das Belas Artes because it was close to the Fine Arts School, but it's called Palacete Iglesias, technically. And it's a neoclassical building from 1859, and it's empty, serving as investment banking. So it's actually closed off. It's very well kept, the facade, but technically there's nothing really going on in there. So this project was also a way of making a more democratic use of this public space, so the buildings in the city. And that resonates with the current housing crisis that we have as well. And this project specifically, we invite artists and curators and researchers to kind of find a way to create this connection between the physical and the digital space through this building. So the history of this building, the space of it. And for 2024, we decided to then explore this concept of digital spatialities. One, because it was really on the basis of the construction of this project. And we will see with Bernard and Seth how the Lisbon one actually differs. And I decided to allow through the collection and through the commission artworks that the artists, the curators, and the researchers invited would then establish this connection between the physical and the digital. We were also, we started the project in 2022, so just after where we thought we were kind of normalized after the pandemic, which meant that we had already discussed the importance of having virtual spaces, online spaces for art institutions. And we learned from that experience that not everyone was prepared. It was not a new thing. And it seems like, okay, we've passed a few years already from the pandemic. We shouldn't, continue to bring that up. But I think in the end, we learned that it doesn't really matter how prepared you think you are. There's always challenges because technology is always changing. And this is what I bring in also this concept of this continuous learning and continuous experimentation. From my research, I really like this concept of that we are all eternal experimenters and we are always on beta mode, meaning that every time we launch something online or virtual, we have to continuously keep it up, not only technically, but trying to also understand what different concepts of these digital spaces that we bring into life. So here we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about what are digital spaces, but perhaps very vaguely, because I think it's still a concept in construction. And we learned a lot from the experience that we had with the artists and the guests that we invited for the talk. So I'm going to show a little bit more about what we did and what we learned as, understood as digital spatialities. And then to start, it was with the website that Seth and Bernard helped us create. Actually, they did most of the work, which I think very much so that we could start off this project. And it's been like this since 2022, and I really like that because, or 2023, because I'm working with the idea that we first research, we first collect and collaborate, and then we decide what we actually are. And this differs a lot from spaces nowadays for art institutions, where you think that you need to have a very neat and concise idea of what institution that is, and what are the spaces, how they are formed, what kind of visual identity. Polly is a designer, we talked a lot about this, and it was really a process throughout the year of how we construct the PdBA in Lisbon. And that said, the website actually doesn't have a collection yet, so we are creating a collection, a public phase part of the collection now. And we hope that that collection will then reflect design-wise what we have been discussing throughout the year. So we're thinking about what is the digital space that we are actually building, and what it actually needs nowadays. One thing that resulted from this experience was that we were really questioning the value of websites for art institutions, because social media became very powerful and very easy to use and manipulate, so everyone has something on their phones. Websites require a lot of maintenance, especially to have it running on a phone. So when you have a desktop, it can run perfectly, and then when you go, maybe for an artwork that is an exhibition that is interactive, that will not always work well on a mobile phone. So we experimented a lot with social media, specifically throughout this year, more than the website itself. And so we bring in this question about these spaces for the art institutions. What is the value of institutional website nowadays, and how much it actually costs us to maintain it, and does it actually create engagement in the end, and if it's easier to be more on a social media side and have that. For us, it's important to have the website because the work that we do, specifically the online exhibitions, are interactive. And like I said, it's very hard to do that sometimes for mobile only, and we like to have both versions in the end. And we started off with Gaspar Cohen. And I'm really going to skip through a lot of projects. I invite you to go to the website, go to social media, and check these projects in depth, especially the online talks. They're all on YouTube on our channel, because they're quite extensive. But I'm just going to point out a few things that we learned from Gaspar's project. Gaspar started off by investigating the last standing palm tree of this building. So he used drones to actually go through the backyard and capture this image, but in the end, the tree is always moving. And for technology-wise, this is not possible to capture and create a 3D model of that because it needs to be static. So Gaspar played with this idea of being unable to capture reality through nowadays technologies, and play a little bit with this gaze of framing things. And from this experience, I learned that this has all to do also with being an institution or being a curator, where you also frame, likewise as a photographer, you're framing a certain reality, and you also have a specific gaze that has certain biases. Gaspar talks specifically about how the facades in Lisbon hide a lot of colonialism, the history of colonialism here. And this tree has everything to do with this because it comes from the time of exotic plants. It's a palm tree from the south. So it has this connection, and I suppose really playing with this idea of a future entity that's trying to grasp what is this object and is not able to kind of fully understand because they're always seeing it through their own kind of framing, right? So this was a big start for us, and actually helped us understand what we are doing as an institution and as a project, that we have to be always aware of this, whether we are framing, be it online or physically in other projects. So this was a few snapshots of the exhibition. You can also check online. This is the Gaspar trying to capture the palm tree. It's really just a blob in the end. So I really like this aesthetic part of how Gaspar was able to capture this. We had also, I think, 5, if I'm not mistaken, visiting artists. The first one was Yanni Osmanis, who is a designer and architect from Latvia. He is working with ruins in Latvia, and he was invited to investigate the building first and then propose another project. He's actually now developing the exhibition that we will host in October, the artwork for October, and it's actually going to be, he's pretending to be in a real estate agency that's going to try to sell the spaces in the Palacio. So we hope that creates a lot of rage maybe, and because he's really creating, so as an architect, he's creating these spaces as a digital twin. So we talked about this in an online talk, what are digital twins, and for Yanis, the most important, I think, potential of digital twins, because it's a term nowadays, everyone is talking about not replications, not appropriation or duplicity. It's actually, the term is digital twins, and it comes from, in terms of architecture, they're thinking of reconstructing a whole building digitally so they can actually understand even plumbing from plumbing and electricity and so on. And for Yanis, the potential of this is actually to liberate certain buildings that are actually, for example, this Palacio, that you cannot touch the facade, you can actually recreate and expand it or destroy it and do something else digitally that you're not able to do with it physically. So actually the digital twin actually allows you to speculate or create other reality scenarios, and that's really interesting. I thought that the talk was really important in this sense. So he's developing that. We also had Eko Saputra, who's originally from Indonesia, now in Italy, and he's developing an artwork, also an interactive exhibition that will be in July, hopefully. Again, these projects are very, I don't want to use the word experimental because that's kind of, everyone says this, but it allows us to kind of not be fixed to a date. Being online, we can also push things around. So we allow the artist to, okay, if it's not right now, we can push a little further and we can do that. So for now, it's July, but it really depends on how Echo develops this. But it's looking very nice. I cannot show you this at the moment because it's in construction. But we had a couple of visits, in fact, to the MUNAC, which is the Natural History and Science Museum, and where he collected spices and butterflies, elements, and created 3D objects for this digital navigation that he's creating together with our designer, Rafael Gonçalves. This is for July. As a bit of a snippet. And then Rafael, the designer, oh, the text is wrong. But our designer also had a workshop which had a big interest from the public, try to understand artistic web development and how to explore techniques for the visual expression in the browser, which shows already a big interest in people in understanding how they can not only create work for online platforms, but how can they extend their presence online if they're already doing this. And this was really interesting to have as a first workshop, for example. We had another workshop which was 3D printing. So we were also thinking about spatialities in terms of dimensionality as well. So we photographed digitally the building and the ornaments that we have there, and then manipulated them on a software digitally, created them in 3 dimensions to be able to print them, and then to discuss. And this workshop was interesting because we were discussing how Lisbon is full of ornaments, and actually those become themselves, or the things that are switched up, that's why from ornaments to souvenir, they become themselves some sort of souvenir, like you see the tram and the particular buildings and so on. And we wanted to make the PdBA, the Palácio Iglesias, also part of this ornamentality, you'd say, of Lisbon. So this was one of the workshops that we did. We then had also a talk by René Cepeda. He's a specialist in virtual worlds and performance in virtual worlds specifically. It was a great, it's not playing automatically. But he was specifically addressing how museums have been using other forms than the online page. We have VR, but we also have museums that were using, I think, is it Pornhub? What was it? Because they have the I forget which one, I think it was Tate, that was using this, that they had nude in paintings you cannot show on social media, so they would go to this particular platforms where you can actually show nudity, and then also have the museum's collection there, so actually it's very more accessible. So we also have artists, yeah. So we also have artists that were working specifically with that as well, doing performance in the spaces to kind of circumvent these limits from these platforms. So it was a very interesting talk, so I invite you also to listen to it. And lastly, we had the recent exhibition with Monsagoto, Dorta Chaco, and Barbara Verones from Brazil, where they were actually this project was done in 2022, but I thought it really resonated with the beginning of this year exhibition, like be the first exhibition of this topic of digital spatialities, because it was, it still is a ruin in Vitória, Espírito Santo, my hometown, that's been there for 10 years, of a museum in construction that was embargoed, or because of legal issues or financial issues, and also ideas of corruption that might be going on at the time, and they were investigating. So it was kind of at halt for 10 years. And they did this amazing video dance where you have some movements around this monumentality of because it's a brutalist building in the middle of the town that is by the sea, and very about wind, water, fluidity, and movement. And I invite you to watch the video on our online exhibition. It's still on, and you can go on the website to experience it. We had a talk with them as well, explaining, this is in Portuguese, but we have captions in English, explaining the whole process and how they were trying to, at a certain point, mobilize the community around it to come and debate about the fact that it's been that way for so long. And of course, people were very moved about it, and I think it was such an interesting project to make, and reflected how our building here is also just standing there, kind of without any movement, when the city is just passing it by, and we have so much sound and so on. We have here today also Florian and Linda is online. So the two artists that are working on projects right now for that's why I'm not mentioning them here. I skipped their visits. They were here, I think you were here in June. Yeah, Linda was here in October. So she also did a workshop here, and she's going to be able to talk to us a little bit more about this in a bit. Yeah, so I'll go back to the website again, like say this is all important, and all of these projects will feed into the next version of our digital space, and hopefully we'll keep on changing. And I think the main idea of the PdBA in Lisbon is to show other possibilities and a bit more malleability, and show that we need a little bit more mobility and movement online as well, and not be determined to have a very specific concept of what a project is or what this institution is about, and be open to these discussions and conversations. So I really hope also we have an opportunity today to have some questions and people maybe questioning and also feeding back into this discussion, how we can actually reconfigure ourselves. And yeah, so that said, I just wanted to give a very brief presentation of the project and the ideas and what we're going to talk about the next presentations. So I invite now Bernard Ganiknik, who is an artist, researcher, professor, and a recent doctor. So also going to talk a bit about his thesis and the idea of institutions as cognitive infrastructure. So I hope we'll be able to understand a little bit more from where we came from, because initially me and Bernard met in 2015, and I've been kind of following up on their projects since then in Vienna, and was then collaborating later on with a few publications, and to finally we proposed, let's bring this this project here to Lisbon as well. And he's here for the first time. For the first time with the PdBA. Yes. So he hasn't also seen the building. So this is interesting.
I have seen the building, but I have not seen all of his amazing work.
Okay, yes, because again, we hope to have the collection soon, and that would translate what we've been collecting so far. Okay, so let me kind of open your presentation. I think it was already kind of open. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, let me just, yeah. Okay. So welcome, Bernard.
Thank you.
I'll leave you to also.
Amazing work, Leah. Congratulations. Very impressive review of work. So let me just check if I can see my notes here.
I won't open for questions for my presentation. I think in the end we will all kind of put everything together. I think it was just an introduction, and we can open for questions after Bernard's presentation if you have anything to ask.
Do you know where
That's a good question.
the notes are? No, that was wrong. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just going to. Sure, now so we can.
Because otherwise, I could just read my notes from my screen.
Yeah, just so that they don't see it. Should be. Oh, that's strange. It should be used.
Should be, yeah, should be easy.
Maybe.
So let's just start the slideshow
Okay.
regularly, and I read them from here.
Okay. So then, let me just reflect and change it. The first one? It's supposed to start from the first one.
Okay, yeah, well, there's supposed to be a blank comment. Okay. This is all very strange.
You want to start?
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
then
this
let's
one.
do this.
Okay.
Okay, this wasn't supposed to be the first slide, but now it is. And let me just set this up so I can read. Where did this go?
Yeah, I'm sure like all the images, but we just saw this, right? Sorry, everyone, we just saw the presentation.
Okay, let's just move it up here. Okay. This is better. Okay, so thank you for coming. I'm going to talk a little bit about my research. I'm not going to talk about the origin story of the Palais des Beaux-Arts Vienna, even though I kind of started it, but I'm getting I got a little bit bored talking about it, honestly, and it's been so long ago. It's been more than 10 years. And also I think through what Leah has been talking about and through what Seth is going to present, it will become pretty clear to you what it is now. And I think it's much more interesting to think about and hear about what it is now than kind of what it used to be in the beginning, because very much like Leah is also saying, I think the interesting part is its development and its transformation, and not so much what the initial idea was. This is because it is truly experimental in that sense that we don't really know what the outcomes are, but we are trying to work with whatever happens. And there are some very interesting things that appear to happen when you run a project like this, and for which I've always been very grateful for this kind of surprises and challenges. So what I'm talking about mostly is a kind of theory of digital institutions, which is based on some thoughts on that I think I've always been having as a media artist and curator on like what the digital is or might be, or what might be specific about it. And then also introducing some of the institutional theories I've been working through in my thesis, and hopefully at the end sort of bring it together into what might be specific about a digital spatial concept as it is kind of in development at the Palacio here in Lisbon, but also in ours in Vienna. So just very briefly, like, and what you see behind me, this is the Palacio, the Palais des Beaux Arts, as it's called, in Vienna. And it's also a building that I found, or that was already there for a very long time. And that, as Leah was saying, I started to occupy or appropriate or borrow or project onto through this project in 2014, and then also started commissioning work for, and that's what it's been since then. And what was interesting
the direction of it. And Bernard so that it's taken, so that it has maybe a little bit of this weird gestalt where you're kind of not sure, like, is this really kind of fully formed institution? Then it sort of breaks down to something. So once I had started doing this, once I was the artistic director, this was this project where for me it became a conversation about reclamation, restitution, asking what is our responsibility, since we know that all of this stuff happened there and that it was kind of left hanging. So this history was more or less cut off. It was fragmented. There was all these voids. The way I sort of first started talking about this was that it was a catalog of voids that we confronted. So you basically had this history, but then you had all these moments that were sort of open. And you kind of ask, well, how do we piece something together that has any resemblance to, where there's some coherence to it, right? Which became clear. Impossible in this case and in so many other cases. So that was also a little bit of the model of looking at this. I think the digital occupation thing was, I think, one of the more flexible ways to go about dealing with that kind of history, because then we never wanted claim to any material. So people ask us a lot in Vienna, don't you want to try and get the building? Don't you want to try and get restitution for the building? And immediately we want nothing to do with this. Like, we're interested in trying to reattach the narrative to the building, right? So if this thing had been separated from it based on this, then saying, okay, what do you do? How do you actually kind of recombine those things a little bit so that if someone's looking at this, it's not that its narrative is lost. An early conversation and I think question for me was, so a building can have this historical protection, and in Austria, it's Denkmalschutz, this common process which the building has. Its facade has historical protection, but its interior, its contents, its history, its narrative, none of that has any historical protection. So it's kind of a weird sort of difference between, let's say, the immateriality and the materiality. So I think for me, one of the things is how do you start to preserve some of this immateriality to some degree? Yeah, so if there are questions about that, I can go deeper into it. I don't know, does that give a little bit of context around it? So I wanted to show you some of the pieces themselves. Bernard set this up a little bit. For me, it was, I think very much a very personal project of also trying to understand my own identity in relationship to this, as well as this family's. See, what does it mean to be a Jew in contemporary Austria? I'm American, so what happens when I come in and start to play with this project? Like, is this also a weird form of occupation that I'm sort of, we're kind of doubling down on all these different ways of negotiating it. So the first one I wanted to show you was something that's called brass email. And what do I have to do?
The first link is also open.
They're open. So basically, Bernard mentioned that one of the sort of protagonists in the history of this is this guy, Tom Launer. He was the great-great-grandchild of the people who had founded the Palais des Beaux-Arts in Vienna. His family had fled, so he had never been to Vienna. And basically, when I started, I also asked Bernard, does the family know about this project? Like, and if they do, shit, are they going to call us and are they going to be upset? Like, are they going to think we've totally sort of ruined their legacy by this weird, sort of project? There weren't many people around to even be in contact with, so it was a sort of floating thing. Then kind of out of nowhere, right after I started, Tom Launer wrote this email to us saying, hey, I found you online. My father was this guy, Brother Theodore, this crazy performance artist who had lived there, and this is my family's building. Wonderful project, really interested in it. And he's already was in his 80s or late 70s when he wrote us this. So he was very forward in this way. And then it started this long, like, sort of dialogue and interaction with him that was really fruitful about what that building meant to him, his fear of it, him trying to look for his family's history. And so at one point, we asked him if he would write an open letter to the city of Vienna that we would print on a plaque and hopefully put on the building. And so this is the letter. I'll just read it to you because it maybe sums up a lot of some of this interaction. Maybe zoom in a little bit. Here. Okay. So the first thing is, when near this plaque, connected device, blah, blah, blah. So this is a way of actually getting into the institution. Let's say this is the sort of handshake of the institution or its entrance, right? Then he writes, "Dear Vienna, 110 years since this Beaux-Arts Bauble of the arts was built, I began to look for my great-grandfather, Arnold Bachwitz, whose vision it was in 1908. It was mentioned in some post-World War II documents as I searched for him, the Palais building becoming, literally, my only tangible heirloom in Vienna, but it was too large to move. Arnold was said to be patriotic and collegial, generous and retiring, a monarchist and Jewish, a patron of the arts and of business. With his wife Rosina, their children Alice and Greta, they ran Atelier Bachwitz, an international publisher that produced and distributed fashion designs and lifestyle magazines. The Palais housed these endeavors and was to be a continuing gift to the street and its galleries, of benefit to artists, visitors, and unexpectedly, a shelter for children in World War I. The Palais des Beaux-Arts was nostalgic toward the grand past it was built within, yet also fully invested in a future that was not to be. Unforeseen wars, acute hatred, and economic depression will do that. Coming late to life, I regret not ever having had a cup of coffee with Arnold. Were he willing to do that? He seemed stern, but photographs can lie. I would be curious about him even if he were not related to me, or vice versa. Such a person is always interesting. I am still waiting to touch the building. We share DNA, it and I. Be well, Tom." So this is a bit of the tone that we were interacting with, where it was like, perfect, because this kind of relationship we had to immateriality, this sort of, let's say, play on language or humor, this was very much clear. It wasn't this person who was really dead serious about this, but very open to the idea of this. So, I mean, unfortunately passed away 2 years ago or 3 years ago now, and he was really a super strong presence at this point, because then everything was kind of like a little bit for him at a certain point of like, hey, we're doing this. We want to make sure we have this for you. And now this is your sort of legacy. And so it felt like there was kind of a responsibility. And we kept trying to get him to Vienna, and because of health issues and other things, it sort of became difficult. But Bernard luckily went and visited him in the US, like an island off of Seattle somewhere. And he joined in on some things. And so, you know, this idea of doing the brass plaque, like, this is maybe a good example of, oh, broken, sorry. My fault, my bad. The brass plaque is maybe an interesting example of looking at, you have like two really sort of antagonistic types of material. You have an email, right, which is fleeting, it will get lost and we'll all lose it, and then you have it engraved in brass. So this is probably like a bit of the ethos of what the project has been. Like, how do you get both of those things to live together on the same surface? This plaque will probably never go up on the building itself because we don't have access to it. What did happen was the city of Vienna bought a copy of our institution, and the brass plaque was the thing we kind of added into the package. So we were like, all right, if you're going to put it in your archives, come quick, like, let's do this so we have something. So that they have now in their collection in the city of Vienna, it's stored, it's held captive. Like, there's this plaque that's for a specific place that will never go there as a kind of record of this process. So we were in a show at the this sort of, it's called the Stadtgalerie, which is like a, you know, municipal gallery from the city of Vienna. How am I on time?
Yeah, you have like a few minutes.
Two,
I think 5 minutes. would be
okay.
enough, yeah.
All right, shit, this is the only one I'll show. So basically what happened was then we showed this, and there's another piece I was going to show that sort of relates to it. There's maybe an image of it in Antoine's piece. Yeah, I'll show it through here really quick.
Take a bit more time.
Okay.
It's okay.
This is why some of the things break with this slider. You have to refresh. Okay.
We're just rushing because the Goethe closes earlier on Saturday. but I would like to give him a bit more minutes to talk about it.
So this is an install view from it in this show. And you don't really see it. It's on the other side of this column. And basically on the other side of that is City Hall. So we mounted it so that the plaque reflected City Hall in it. So he had already passed away by this time, but in that show, I wrote a sort of letter to him that became a bookmark that you could have. That was basically saying, hey, we couldn't get it on the building, but we could get it like across from City Hall. That's something, right? And so this was a bit of this moment. We miss you. Here's the best we could do, kind of like, you know, hope everything's good. Give us a call if you can. And so then this, what you're seeing is a light box. So this is another thing where this is a bit of this active reclamation. So this artist, Antoine Torion, which is the piece I'm showing you, he did a piece called Atelier Bachwitz, where he re-registered the brand from the fashion company back to the Palais. So of course it had been severed or it hadn't been registered. So now we actually have the rights to use the Atelier Bachwitz brand, which was part of the family. So I'll show you, they had all these logos. And he registered, this is the patent where he did it. We have it for 10 years. His project, what you're seeing is his site will erase according to the 10-year time that we have the registration for this. So it's basically covering itself over the course of 10 years. And so what you have is that this really interesting thing in order to register a brand, or maybe back up, the idea from Antoine was, hey, what's happening with all these logos? What happens with the Atelier Bachwitz publishing house, which was in this building, which had published quite a lot, and then was cut off, of course, at a certain point during Aryanization and other processes. And so he wanted to say, can we use that again? Or is it possible for us to publish within that name, or to kind of, you know, work with this? So basically what he found was when he registered it, he had they had weird categories. And one was commemorative shields, monuments not out of metal, and fashion design consulting services. So now the Atelier Bachwitz brand, which we have, this AB thing, is registered as a commemorative shield, a monument that's not out of metal, and a fashion design consulting service. So you have this kind of weird space where these, I would say, again, to the kind of humor thing, it's a bit dry. It becomes sort of bureaucratic jokes somehow, but it's also kind of looking probably at the site-specific situation of that. Let's say some of the violence was highly bureaucratic in this situation. So maybe some of the tools for sort of working against that are also bureaucratic to some degree, right? And some of the humor within this. So this one I wanted to show because this marked one of these changes. And I think that's what I've looked for a lot with commissioning. What Bernard had looked for is like, it's really ideal when you have people that you're talking to, they may like throw out this kind of batshit funny idea that's like, hey, I could do this, where you register and say, great project, let's do it. And that's often a lot of the commissioning things, at least in the way I've worked. And some of those ideally are rearranging the way we think about ourselves. So if they sort of change what we can do, what we think we can do, they become really exciting projects. So this, for example, this opens up this idea, wait, are we now continuing the process of what was happening in this building? And it was kind of clear, well, we kind of had been to some degree by doing this sort of interdisciplinary sort of work. So just to even show some of that overview, where is this here? Yeah. So yes, we've been doing some of this. Part of Antoine's work was doing a timeline of the brand. So this is also like with each project, some people were really mining the history and trying to kind of deepen it. In his case, we made a t-shirt timeline. So with all of these, every time you refresh the site, you basically get a different timeline. So it's a non-linear timeline that we've created, which is also, I think, to the kind of ethos of saying, all right, if we're dealing with this historical thing, we don't want to fall into this convention of A to B, but how do we actually make that? And this is one of those things where probably the digital spatiality, it's like, good luck trying to do that in physical space, where every time you enter the room, it's rearranged. Like this would be, you could, but it would be very, very difficult, and you'd need a huge budget. Where with this, you need a person at a laptop and some ideas, right? Or multiple people at laptops. So with this, what you get is it's looking at what happened with each of these. So this becomes, the t-shirt timeline becomes also a bit of a joke of branding, you know, that, okay, we put these things on, we start to look at it. And he looked at like what were some of these hot fashion brands at the time and really expensive, and sort of was appropriating them to do this. If there are questions, stop me. Sorry, I just like railroad.
You can do the questions for later. Yeah. So 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. Okay. Last one that I'll show because this maybe makes sense, but there's a lot of other work in the collection. Some of it is much more sort of visually playful and is less attached to the history. Some of it is much more sort of deeper cuts dealing with the history. So it's been a bit of a collage of things. It's been very impulsive as I've been doing the artistic direction. This is something that's come out of sort of a community of people I've been having conversations with, or ideas that come or things you want to explore. I'm often asking people who don't work in the digital realm to do something specifically for a website, because I think it's a really interesting problem to say, you're really like, you have a studio practice, you're doing sculpture, like, can we squeeze it into a website? And how do we do that? And how do we get the intensity of your work into this kind of digital platform? So that's often a bit of the conversation for me. So this is Brother Theodore, a stand-up tragedy artist who, this is Tom Launer's father. And he was kind of an iconic figure in America that I didn't know about until we researched this, but he basically is alive because of Albert Einstein. And so there's this kind of crazy story that surrounds him in the family. He did something what he called stand-up tragedy. And so what he did is he like sort of played this almost like German minstrel show in the US because he had to flee. And a lot of it was like this very dark humor and this kind of German expressionist theatrical sort of moves. He was in some movies. He was on TV quite a lot, actually. So, you know, it's titles like The Degrading After Effects of Living, A Black Mass for All Colors, Brother Theodore, philosopher, metaphysician, and podiatrist. So he's sort of combining all these different things. One, there's this really great clip where he's on David Letterman and he comes on totally serious. He's like, David, we have to talk about something. There's an epidemic in America, podiatry. Like, we have to deal with people's foot problems. And he was always often like, he had this whole bit where he was saying, we needed to stop being bipedal. We need to be quadrupedal again. We needed to get out down on all fours. Like, this was a mission of his to try and get us to stop walking upright and to get back on all fours. So he was hilarious. And I think like this is also a bit of the tone to hope, like, can we continue that aspect of it? And he's really an inspiration, I think, to me, specifically how he dealt with it. So this artist, Chris Deca-Otet, one of the pieces he did, he said, I want to train a language model to resurrect Brother Theodore's voice. So we resurrected Brother Theodore's voice so he could read his own obituary. And so what you have is he ended up, and this was in, what was this, 22 or something? This was a few years ago. So it wasn't AI stuff in terms of voice technology wasn't so pervasive on a kind of consumer level. Now it'd be very simple to do. So he had to really work and like train a model, make his own thing. He spent months like working on it. And he had to deal with things that were with crowds in them and strange, like, because there was stuff recorded, but it was, you know, never, hey, here's this straight monologue thing. So then what we ended up doing was we sort of made a fake record. So one of the pieces. Should be playing. It's playing.
Yeah.
Shit. Anyway,
It's an invitation for people to
So-
go to the website. and
yeah,
check it
go to the
out.
website and look at it. So basically, I ended up making sort of a few different pieces out of this, which he generated also new content based on this. So he trained the model to also generate things within Brother Theodore's voice. So what it ended up creating, one of the pieces is this one's called Silver Shoes on a Grave. And this was the LP cover we decided to sort of go for. We didn't end up having the money to actually make the LP, but this was the idea. So the first piece, Dew of Decay, Caressing on All Fours, A Very Bad Time to Be Alive. And then he wanted to do sort of these like jungle remixes of it, and dub remixes and stuff. So Extinction, right? And For Solace and For Hope. And then the other one, the Dew of Decay, is like this poetic thing, this more poetic reading of his. So all of these you'll hear Brother Theodore, or let's say the clone or the kind of resurrection of Brother Theodore reading these things. Audio work. And then the one that's kind of like probably the deeper conceptual joke is to have him read his obituary that was in the New York Times within his own voice, right? And sort of course, this is like a very Theodorian move, and we'd hope he would be proud of us for doing it. Who knows? So that's maybe a little bit of some of the overview.
You can continue as questions. Does anyone have questions for Seth at the moment? Okay, so I'll start.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, you were good.
I have like two thoughts, because Jannike's question was very point on things that have been asked me as well.
Yeah.
Because before the PdBA Lisbon, I presented a couple of times about PdBA in Wien, and people often ask me, but how do you believe them?
Yeah.
Like, how do you believe them after a certain joke in the beginning, and then you bring out the story about this person in the US?
Yeah.
And I don't know how you deal with that in terms of between truth and lie and play and also I think another interesting topic to address is I really like how this project really tries to lead that particular work and how do you actually deal with this. I also don't like the word ephemerality because everything is ephemeral at some point. It depends on your perspective. And how do you deal that with the purpose of working with a museum that wants to preserve the PdBA and you trying to erase it at all costs at some point?
I mean, I think that's the contradiction of the project, like that we're sort of trying to, I don't know, maybe the easiest, like, I've had to try and deal with this more recently. I think probably what happened was it hit this point where we'd done a lot of research. We kind of tried to recover as much as we could, like as best as we could. Then it's sort of now hitting the point of, okay, I think we've got a lot of that covered. Like, I don't know how much more is out there floating around. Hopefully, but then stuff kind of comes back to us. So the one way I've like maybe talked about it to people is that it's like it's an accidental memorial. And that it's something like, and that's also to this point of like that the thing changes and it moves based on who's doing what, right? So I think, first of all, the truth, like the fictional real thing, like the thing with this is like, it's as real as we know. We're trying, like we are trying to research it well. Like we're not fucking around. And it just like kind of looks that way because of the overall shape of the thing. But I think it's like, you know, you tell people that, yeah, we occupy a building, but we don't have keys to it. We're an accidental memorial. Like we have these little phrases that are like kind of jokes in and of themselves. But I don't know. I think we've tried to be respectful. And I think for me, there was a lot of conversations with Bernard, I think early on of like, how do we do something contemporary and still be respectful to this history, which also, of course, has like moments that are super problematic and are not what we would want to be promoting. Like, how do you not erase those as well or fall into the same traps of censoring things that maybe don't fit your vision at the moment, but still should maybe be preserved to be able to look at later? I don't know. I'm not answering your question at all. I totally
no, you are, and I wanted just to contribute as well because that makes me think that when we're thinking about digital space or digital spatiality, you can't, there's no way of not thinking about the physicality of things as well and vice versa. So just to show as well, I hope you all get to this feeling that working in the digital space also involves a lot of connection to the local communities, to time, to in our case with a bunch of layers, especially in the Lisbon case where you paint over facades over and over, you can see the materiality of that space that can actually also translate it to the digital. And you also mentioned something about an exhibition not being able to be different every single time someone enters.
It's difficult, but you could do it.
You could do it, but I also heard from other interviews that I conducted back in my master's is that especially when you're dealing with the digital in a physical space, it is different almost every day because like we're seeing like streaming is going completely crazy now. But then at some point in one exhibition, you'll have a piece that's not working, and then the next day you need to change a cable, you need to change another piece, and something needs to be rebuilt or ask people to reconfigure completely a website that's being projected. So it can get to a point where things are it can be very different every time you visit a museum. And this came from a museum in Switzerland that now has been closed called Muda. The curators there that work specifically with digital art said that every time you walk into the exhibition, it's different because we have to rearrange things so much to make things and keep things alive and working. So that also brings me the idea that change might not be perceptible. in a very
Yeah.
visible way, but it is happening. So
Yeah.
it's never very static in that sense.
Yeah, and one thing, I mean, that I sort of derailed when I started to talk about it, when the city of Vienna had sort of acquired let's say a copy of the institution, which was more or less a print of the website in 2020 and all of the work, was that they had to figure out how to archive this. And we had a really interesting restorer named Alma Schilling, shout out to her, like really it was a wonderful conversations, because then she was like, okay, I like gave this big box of hard drives and everything on it. And she would ask, like, you have double folders, should I delete them? Or like, what should I like do some housekeeping? And the conversation was no, because you should leave. I was like, in a flat file, you wouldn't take doubles and throw it away. Like maybe even though it's a mess, maybe it's a good portrait of who we are and it should be left. And then to have it going, she was really upfront and super interested, like really nice about the story. She said, as long as I'm here, I can guarantee this kind of runs based on what I build for it, like the website to be offline. So the idea is that the website could function offline. So then it was archivable. You weren't attached to this grid, of course, electricity and stuff, but a little more autonomous. And then she could say like, oh, I can guarantee 5 years where my contract is, but I have no idea when I'm gone, like what's going to happen. So it's very fragile. And maybe this was the thing with the brass email and this is like, we're kind of, maybe ephemerality is the wrong word, but it's maybe like fragility and stability.
Yeah.
It's this kind of aspect.
But that's also for buildings in this case.
Totally,
where you see,
totally.
In our case, the building that's not being used.
Yeah.
It needs to be preserved, but I can see already from the years that we started to now, it's changing. The facade is changing because it's not being completely preserved at all times, and it's a different maybe rhythm. And that's any question? Yeah.
Yeah. So sort of comment and question. So as someone who works within a physical museum, it's a very provocative idea. And one of the things that I don't fully, I mean, it's not about agree, disagree, but that what makes museums are not just the physical artifacts, but the public engagement and the maintaining archives of that public engagement. So that leads to the question, within this digital space, do you have a space for commentary? Is there engagement? And are you saving that? Because that's, in my estimation, a true way to kind of capture new interpretation of these elements over time.
I mean, this makes a lot of sense. I think in our case, based on the sort of limits of like also, relatively young in comparison to probably some of these other institutional ones, relatively underfunded in comparison to some of these probably projects. The only thing we have, like I can show you here, which is maybe a little bit of kind of data entry logic, which is like, what is it? So you sort of ask, what do we have in our collection actually, right? What is it we have? And so that became an interesting thing. Like, well, we have the format, it's an interactive website with audio. The material, it's a digital soundtrack from 91 audio stems. What's its size? Like, how do you talk about the size of this? And so you say, well, it's responsive. So that means it can grow, shrink, but it's 43 minutes, and 10 seconds. So size is time-based. So some of them, it's like, we're talking about this, the year, who did it, and thanks. There isn't a comment section. There's a thing of kind of annotating this, like, which is a super interesting idea. And I think it was something where this was already a lot to like sort of go through and build and do stuff. So I think that was something to maintain that and have that sort of work. Like, I think, yeah, it makes sense. It's a good, like, I'm gonna bank that idea.
But actually, we are kind of doing that specifically, not just with the interaction with the public, but I think that an institution is everything also that we create and produce also collaboratively. And so for the collection, we want to add not only all the versions of this so many different versions of what the PdBA is that I have to write for either funding or, for social media. So it's always changing. So I want to also add all the definitions that were through with it, but also all our social media content, anything that we created and produced, even documentation, to be part also of the collection that people have access. Because also as a researcher, I love institutional archives. And it's such a pity that most of them are closed off and you have to go to the physical museum to actually go over papers and papers and papers of how the institution was run, how people interacted with it, the letters between artists and commissioning, and the building of exhibitions, and how things was developed throughout time. And I think that's a really important aspect of it. So for our collection, we're trying to add those elements to it, and not be just a collection of artworks commissioned specifically in a certain period. So thank you, Seth, very much. Thank you very much. I'm going to Now we have Linda Vilke. She's online. She's a multimedia artist from Latvia. And I'm going to stop sharing my presentation so you can go ahead and share yours as well while I talk about a bit about you. So Linda, she works a lot with materiality. She's one of the examples of an artist that we call that, hey, experiment something with the digital. What do you think? She was very much involved with the community in Latvia. She also created a lot of institutions. And I asked her to also talk about this past practice and how she tried to revitalize spaces in a community. And I hope that she will be able to talk a little bit about the exhibition that we are developing now with the commissioned work from her, but also Rafael Gonçalves, web designer. And it's scheduled for early May, so almost at the end, but we can't reveal too much yet of the exhibition. Linda, go ahead. Do you want to share your screen? I think.
Am I not? Is not the is the screen up?
Maybe your audio is turned off. Your microphone.
Second. 1 second.
We also didn't get anything from the speakers.
Yeah, I think do we do something when we were testing things out?
So are you?
Did the volume?
Do you hear me now?
I wouldn't advise because we have to finish soon.
Leah, do you hear me?
For some reason, we have no audio from Linda. Yeah. Sorry, Linda, we're trying to. Microphone is on. Everything is on. It's coming from the HTML. Academy, how to say it in English.
Do you hear me now? No?
Yeah, I'm trying to maybe see if it's a bit on our side. Just a second. I don't know why. Yeah. Actually, Florian, we changed that for yours. We had changed the output. Thank you for reminding us. That was it. Just a second. Where is this? Just a second. You could just change the. I can't open the. No, I think it's because we had changed the audio setting. Just a second.
Can you play something? So that yeah, coming from you.
No, it's actually.
Just to check it.
Anything?
Can you try and find the maybe?
Can you make this computer output some sounds? Can be anything.
Yeah, this is what we were trying to.
But it should
Yeah.
play something, so something should be
I
coming
will.
out.
But the output is right.
Yeah,
It's
just
over
play
there.
something. Play
It's
something.
right. It's right. Yeah.
Does it work? Did you use something?
No. I mean, the output was right. Everything was right.
Yeah. Just play
It's great. Perfect. Linda, are you there? Now we're supposed
Still
to hear
here.
you. Right. Perfect.
Do you
So
hear
where's
me?
Okay. And do you hear us fine?
Yeah, yeah.
So you can share the screen.
Okay, I can hear myself too, yes.
Sorry, but if you put some headphones, it'll be better.
Can you tell me if you see the screen?
Yes, we see the screen. Wait,
Okay,
but not
amazing.
just a second. Just
Mhm.
okay. Now everyone can see you, so you can. But we don't see your
Yeah.
screen anymore.
I know I turned it off because I didn't understand what's going on. Because the thing is that I don't see you when I'm sharing, unfortunately. So,
Okay. Okay.
um,
Go ahead.
do you see it now?
It comes on and off.
Still?
So it just goes away, like you connect and it disconnect.
Okay.
You can also share
Confusing.
if you
Do you see it like this or no?
no. I'm gonna share. I'm
Ah,
gonna share.
okay. I see that. 1 second.
Yeah, because I have your
I'm s-
presentation here, so I can share your presentation, and then just tell me when to. Okay, let's try again.
Do you see
Okay,
it
now
now?
yes. Okay,
I'm
yes,
guessing that it's there. Yes.
yes. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Cool. So 10 minutes are done already, so we can skip forward, right? So my name is Linda Vilka, and I will try to give as much information as it's possible, but for sure that there will be a lot of that missing. Uh, so, me as an artist, I'm a multidisciplinary artist, as Leah said. I also categorize myself as a storyteller, and I just recently graduated from a professional doctorate. So I have obtained my professional PhD, and I work as a guest lecturer in the Art Academy of Latvia in environmental art department, where I also studied bachelor's and master's. Topics I work with are self-reflection. Usually it's around some emotional complexities that we kind of uh, don't want to work on. Often it's participatory, community-based art, also contemporary art. And I work with forgotten places, and everything always surrounds the concept, and then the form and the materiality follows. Usually it's I work with I have worked with the videos, I have worked with performance, and recently it's more towards painting and text. Yeah, text also is a part of my life. I like that previously there was a mention of pretending to be a museum, because I haven't pretended to be a museum, but I have pretended to be an embassy, a residency, a gallery, a gardeners association, and probably some other titles I have forgotten at this point. And I have been working in Latvia and abroad. Also, like professionally wise, I cannot I can't really say that I'm only an artist. I have worked in interior. I have worked with visual merchandising. I have also been a rice spike cutter and blueberry farmer that I am still to this day, and other roles as one day bar owner that people still think I own. So imagining to be a museum is in the same category, I think. And yeah, different residencies in different places of Latvia and abroad. One that it was a bit more intense, I would say, was the Acniste psychoneurological clinic, where I had to work with the patients there for a month. And that was also the project that got the title of Acniste Gardeners Association, because that was created together with the local patients that lived there. Here's just two examples so you kind of can connect with what I'm talking about, at least for the first glimpse. As I said, I work with text. It's usually commentary on something or just a phrase I have heard on the bus or somewhere else, or just a text that kind of combines itself in my notes or just overall. I work with layering. I work with a lot with experimenting of different layers and materialities. So that is kind of the main point for me. And I also work with my own handwriting. That is the base of it all, because the format can change, but the handwriting stays and follows the format. In my practice, I focus on close observations. So it's usually human behavior, it's everyday gestures, things that we kind of maybe don't notice often, some regular rituals or social rituals, um, different structures. Usually, mostly it's based on emotional structures, on mental health, on culture, political, just a bit sometimes. Depends on the day and again the context. And yeah, it's very important for me how we as people and together with these topics, how we relate to each other. And yes, desire to reveal tension between the visible and the invisible. That is also something that I enjoy, some small glimpses and commentary in the works. So I would define it more towards a research-informed, intuitive process. That's at least for now how I'm defining it. Probably in a week it will be something else. I work with concepts, with the sensitivity to material and context. I try to keep my interventions minimal or not, just keeping it ethical also, which is very important for me, and it should be for everyone in community art. That was also a topic I researched when I was doing my PhD, that there are some examples where the community art and participatory art has gone in unethical ways in using the participants. So that is something that shouldn't be practiced for sure. A bit deeper into the process, as I remember Leah asking me, can you please explain what is the thought process behind developing it? So I tried to kind of create a little structure for it. Of course, everything starts with a thought that is floating somewhere around. Usually it's based on observation and a small moment that hasn't left my mind. Then the encounter follows, which is the site, the environment, people, situations, where I listen and respond. And this is also where usually it's easier to figure out what kind of materiality will come in, at least the way it should go, but it's not fully clear at that point yet. Then the realization, where the form follows idea. So always concept is the main point, and the story follows, and the material follows the story. And often it's, again, as I said, intuitive making, which I think works great for these kinds of works. So here's a little escalation, as you see by the arrow. So the perception comes in, the attention, slowness, viewer experience. So a closer attention, not only from myself, but also for the viewer or the user comes in. And an important point is collaboration with people, places, time, and myself included. And at the end, it's like going a bit down, kind of, because it's closing into the final thought. So it always goes around. It always the previous work is connected to the next, and it's always a extension of idea or a thought. And so that's why the thought is floating around here and not completely connected to the line that leads us towards. So everything, yes, every work feeds the next. That would be how I would also describe that. And the thing is that it's funny how it kind of looks like a potato that's sprouting. And while thinking over the process I go through, I understood that again, that is something I have kind of referenced for myself when I started even thinking about creating art or becoming a serious artist. And that now I can say that that was 10 years ago. And that the little potato was something that I once decided to be to enjoy a camping experience when everything was raining, and so the only things I had in the tent was paper, ink, a knife, and a potato bag. So all I could do was carve the potatoes and create or try to create some kind of prints, and that kind of became the whole uh, like the moment that pushed me into art more, where I started to see the experimentation can be something completely even confusing to myself, and then only later on I see the result. So that that is very fun for me, that it's at the end looks like a potato that's sprouting. um so one work that kind of indulges in materiality and also in digital is therapy in session. This will also be the main project that I'm mentioning from my previous works. So this was here's also a quote from myself, because I enjoy quoting myself and referencing also, unfortunately. And so this project is from 2020, when the first signs of COVID started. So that was when I was in my master's, and I wanted to do that was before like COVID was in Europe yet. So I started doing my Erasmus exchange in Vilnius, because I kind of understood that it would probably get to us. So I didn't go to the first plan where I was planning to go to Linz. So I kind of switched to Vilnius to be closer in case of anything. So, and the day before everything closed, I went to the local, uh, like the department store and the, the store you have, the like, depot with the wood and everything, all the materials possible. And I went there and I bought everything that came to mind, because I knew that for a while we will be stuck in our spaces and I will need something to do. So I bought anything that caught my attention. I bought a lot. I carried it. I brought it, and I used it all. That I thought I would use it for the whole process that we were stuck in the spaces. But I used it in a month because I got carried away with productivity, because that was the moment when no one was disrupting me. So I could just create. I could create paintings, videos. I created masks, video performance, and just documented my, I would say, insanity at that point. This was how my this is a glimpse from the video. I didn't open the video because I thought that we don't have enough time for that, because it's 6 minutes and 44 seconds. So there's just screenshots from it. So this is how my space looked at the time. It was a 3 by 3 room that I had in the hostel there. Of course, the people in charge of the hostel didn't know that this was happening in their space, but everything got left clean after I visited there. So the whole space turned into my obsessions, my breakdowns. I collected my breakdowns. I worked through my breakdowns. This was also like one of the first times I truly looked deeper into myself, and I understood that I enjoy working with harsher situations for myself, and these mental difficulties that are in need of entanglement. So on the wall, you can see there's like a work that consists of many Sudokus I was playing and collecting, because I needed to do something each day that wasn't just paint. So that was something I could at least get my brain working in a different angle. So I was just working with Sudoku. So different layers, small sculptures, mask, everything you can possibly imagine. And yeah, there was a text that I created at the start that's let your art get corona so it too goes international. Um, that's yeah, that the work doesn't exist anymore, so that's a nice reminder. And yeah, in the space there, I slept, I worked, I got ready for going to places where I couldn't, and I also became someone else at some point. That was again inspired by that sprouting potato, and just becoming a kind of a participant of a new civilization that can exist in a 3 by 3 space and survive completely fine. Um, yeah, as the situation around us shifted, so did my works. Uh, the creative silence helped me to get clarity for which way to go with my work. This is after the restrictions were at least lifted. This also was a work that was created in that same space. There was only one balcony for the whole building, and that was connected to my room. So this 6 meter work was created there, just piece by piece, and it was for me to collect my breakdowns again. Each time I had some angst or some anger in me, so I would just use the alkyd paint to put it on the fabric to kind of leave it there and not carry it around with me. This was also one of the breakdowns that says untitled art is sad, because at that time and still there's a lot of untitled art, and that's just sad. This work has been in few exhibitions. This was from Estonia, where I had to kind of recreate the space in a smaller version and a bit different. So yeah, in the text you can see that therapy in session is just what you think it is, a therapy in session, and just the text about me processing the situation and questioning uh, myself and playing around with the words that I enjoy doing. And for this project, as you can see, materiality has again been present and
Linda, we lost you a little bit. Can you hear us? I think we lost the connection. Let me message her. We can talk among ourselves. I really love her work in so many ways. Let me message her. She hears us. Maybe take your video and or connect again. This is your video. That's
okay. Yeah,
okay. Now you're
sorry. Yeah. So did I get this far or no? Or
yes,
previously?
yes, yes. No, yes.
Here?
The other side. You can go forward. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Um, happens. So I visited Lisbon in October, and the first thing, of course, was the first impression of the building that had the materiality, the surfaces, the facade, everything that's just meeting the eye at the first glimpse. But of course, looking deeper into the archives and researching and going to the museums, there I noticed that there's a lot of tension between the storylines, between the history of the building, and that's something that I want to also bring into this project, not forgetting the layers and the visual research, but also adding the depth of the tension and the kind of confusion, I would say, even about the building that uh, still to this day it stands there and kind of forgotten, even if it's in the center and so noticeable. And 1 second, there was an idea that I just lost, like the connection. So yeah, and through the process of the artwork, I want to kind of quietly try to unravel at least half of it. But the work is, if at the start I thought that it would be, I think I will carry on so you can see the few of the layers because I'm not showing too much yet, but you can see the explorations of materiality and a little sneak peek of something that comes later. And if at the start I thought that the work would be more, that I wanted to do it more about the community, but at one point it's shifted because I noticed a lot of like poetic storylines for it. So I kind of went more towards that because again I follow my intuition, and if that seems like a more important aspect, that's what I'm going after to explore more. And yeah, the whole work is separated. It will be when you will see it's separated in three kind of layers, but it has many layers in the one group. So it goes through the first impression to the tension, and then towards the ending, towards the unknown that's getting unraveled a bit. So, in spite of all, I am still. You can read it as you wish. Am I still as not moving, or am I still here? And that's kind of what how I suppose I'm ending this story. But maybe you have already some questions. I will stop the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think before we go to questions, I was going to say that to give a bit of context. So we're doing an online exhibition of her work, which is very
Yeah,
much
sorry.
material, like there's some texture to it. So I really enjoyed how much quality the images that she's producing has in terms of digital images. And what's going to happen is that we are able to actually, if you're on a screen, on a mobile screen or something that's touch screen, you can actually wipe out some of that texture and you go through layers. And on a computer, you
So
can
you
do.
will kind of need to find the answers yourself through the whole work.
Yeah, and this kind
But
of
yeah, so it's
sorry. I was going to say
Sorry.
this resonates a lot with I was saying before, like the building itself has lots of paint layers, and it's also a way of us trying to reveal the building through this kind of scraping around. And I really like how she portrayed it. Does anyone have any questions for Linda now? By the way, we loved the presentation. You couldn't hear us, but we were laughing and enjoying
yeah,
it.
I could you could have been booing there and I wouldn't know. So oh well.
This is why I wanted to say that I took the audio so you don't hear us, but it was great.
Yeah,
Any
it was
questions?
very weird. I thought I was talking to myself as usual. Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time.
Any questions? So I'll start. Lynn, I wanted to you to kind of bring in, because you're the artist, as we were talking about, as an example of an artist that's very does a lot of physical paintings and works with materiality specifically. How did you feel transitioning to this kind of more of a digital surface, and how did you come up with this idea of actually also integrating some part of the participants into the work and the process as well?
The thing is that I used to work more digitally, and then I don't know, some kind of shift again in my mindset switched, and I started working physically. But that was never the case for a long time, and it was hard for me to transition to physical work and to materials, and yeah, now some start to call me a painter, but very weird for me. But yeah, and during the process of being now in this materiality mindset, and now looking back again at the digital, it's very hard. It was easier to transition from the digital to material than it's going back. So that, I think, was the reason why the materiality followed me, because I tried at the start kind of ignore that part of me and maybe figure out how to make it fully digital, but then I understand that I'm just going against my practice again, so that doesn't really work. Did you ask something more? Sorry.
No, yeah, it's exactly
I
that.
got very into the materiality, but yeah, the thing is that the material followed, and there were a lot of options of how this work should be developed and how it will be developed. There was also divination aspects that we were talking about including, or other ways, and more community, but at least now we're going back to the participatory, so it's like a nice balance. But previously I was trying to push it towards one or the other, and it was harder to do so. So it's a challenge for me, yes, but through the materials that I'm working with to develop the textures that I kind of noticed there, because there's a lot of like the ash in the materials and the wood also, yeah, the paint itself, so it's taken from there to be included, because I took also some wood from there, some branches that got burned to be in the material. So there's a bit more from it than just me taking some random ash. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Any questions? No? Okay. We are going to transition to Florian's piece. He's going to add his computer, or are you going to do with the streaming
Yes,
there?
I'm going to.
Linda, thank you very much. That was very nice.
Thank you. Bye.
While Florian is settling down here, I'm going to say that this work also brings in that aspect of digital spatiality, as we're trying to really explore the 2D aspect of a online page in a three-dimensional simulation. And this is, I think, the layering, her process of layering one image after another, and we can scrape it from the screen, really brings that feel that you're kind of navigating through the space as well. So I invite you to follow us, and we have the exhibition in May, early May, for you to experiment with that as well. Okay, so we have the projection here. I think everything's set. Yeah. Do you want me to? How would you? It's the sound is all set because we were having difficulties with the sound, and he has a Mac, so it's only.
Yes, so I think everything is set.
Okay.
We will deal with it.
Okay, let's
once
see.
it comes up. Okay.
So this is Florian Wieczek. So he's also from Vienna, originally from Germany, and he's has been working with mediation strategies, digital mediation strategies for a long time as well, and with sound and composition. It's a very diverse project. One that was recently about a walk through a sound walk, was it? So you can explain a little bit more about that. On a physical path in Vienna. What's it called? The region?
So now it's in Upper Austria, in Ansfelden,
yeah,
St. Florian, yes.
So there's elements of that, but he also works a lot with digital spaces and online and different online platforms as well. I will let you dive into. He was here in June to investigate the Palacio and was investigating how to take some sounds of the building as well and create a piece and compose a piece for us. And then now we're also discussing how we're going to present this later on in terms of well, you dive into that, but in terms of engagement with the participants and visitors at the physical site, or if it's just going to be online. So I'll leave you to talk about it. Go ahead.
Yes. So, yeah, thanks also, Leah, for the invite, and thanks to all of you for being here and having a look at this kind of work in progress. The project is called Sonic Histories that I'm working on, and yeah, I will dive into my concepts of that. So, I mean, kind of the background is this project. So it's a project specifically created for Palácio das Belas Artes Lisboa. And like the starting point was for me really this kind of question, how can I approach kind of a physical space with its historic layers, with this kind of digital means, and how can I create a meta experience? So for me, it's always also it's always about creating experiences. So since I work with museums, I work with digital and physical experiences. And so, yeah, for me, it's always about the space in between. And so I always talk about it as kind of an holistic experience. For a museum that is bringing physical displays and digital displays together into one experience where all these layers kind of talk to each other and influence each other. And augmented reality as a medium is quite interesting to do that, since you can kind of bridge physical and digital. But also, if you think about an historic building or any kind of site, any kind of space, it's really bringing these different experiential layers together into one experience, which is important for me. And I mean, I work with a lot of different digital media formats, but in my artistic work, mainly with sound and also with a concept called sound scenography, which also combines spatial design and sound design. And I will dive into that in a little bit. But when we think about augmented reality and different physical spaces, so I want to go not only into my projects, but projects that kind of are inspiring my way of thinking about these topics. And so there are a lot of approaches of these kind of outdoor guides and outdoor tours, also from museums where they take their collection items and place it into a different space, or where you can re-experience like stories and objects from the past within the space of their origin. Like you have here in Montréal en Histoire, where you overlay kind of historic photographs with the buildings today, or you create some kind of artistic works on their own, or like extensions of works that are shown in the gallery, as with the Mazer project by Mdizar, where they extended kind of the exhibition from a street artist called Mazer into the public space in front of the gallery through an augmented reality experience. So yeah, different approaches there. And for me, kind of the value of digital cultural objects in augmented reality is really that you can enrich physical spaces and objects. So they become kind of information hubs, story hubs, knowledge hubs. And every place can also become a place for learning, a place for storytelling, for connecting with different layers of the past, of the present, of the future, and kind of a coordinate system for information, for experiences. And so, yeah, these kind of cultural objects, as the building is a cultural object in itself, are always kind of a starting point and an anchor point of dialogues, of stories, but also to connect visitors and institutions or visitors and artists together. And augmented reality kind of acts as a lens or a frame to really get people into conversation. And it's also really also about this kind of manipulation value, where you can yourself interact with these kind of objects. And as I said, sound sonography is for me a very central approach also to bridge kind of my sonic work and in general sound with spaces. And it's really about bringing kind of these staging spaces, environments together with sound, and to stage those spaces through sound as well, to really think, okay, how does a space sound like in itself? How do I want it to sound like? How do sounds kind of come into the space and shape how we experience the space, how we experience artworks? And also the museum space and also an historic space is never really silent. So listening is really a part of a museum experience, of an exhibition experience, but also of our experience of everyday life, right? So we are, in the museum, we also want to make a connection to lived experience, and lived experience has sound. We need to take sound seriously. And so all experiences in our world are in a way multisensory, different for different people, very subjective experiences, but we always include all the senses we have at our disposal in the way we see and interpret the world. And if you think about a digital museum, a digital space, there also sound can really play a significant role. And so it's not just decorative or reduced to accompany images, but it is an object in its own right. So that I think is an important takeaway. And all of these are not so much my thinking, but come from Idee und Klang, and they published it in their book, The Art of Designing Sound for Spaces. And so I kind of borrow their thoughts. And For me, the question, okay, why sound in a cultural heritage setting, but also an artistic setting? So on the one hand, sound really can heighten your concentration, can deepen your perception, as it kind of bypasses your first layer of like assessing what's going on, but really directly can trigger emotions. And so for me, that is also this kind of how can I play and bring people in a state of emotion I want them to be in for experiencing work, experiencing a space. That is something that I find quite interesting. And music as a universal language, in a way, as Uli Drexler also calls it, that can really do this, opening essential and emotional access to specific topics, to places, to objects. And these kind of sonic spaces always enable immersion into story, but it can also transport us to other times, other places, also in a complete fictive story. And if we think about something like audio AR, where kind of we are in an immersive space through listening, through audio, and we are, of course, in the physical world, so also immersed in a physical space, still our gaze and our hands stay free. So we can look around, we can explore, we can touch, we can move freely, but still we have this kind of sound layer that guides us through it, that really, yeah, can bring us into a different dimension of experience. And so for me, sound sonography always acts as kind of an augmentation of the environment. So any space can become an exhibition space by just adding this kind of layer, and where we can change the experience. And so we can, of course, have different storytelling formats. So for me, also, as Wilke was telling before as well, it's always also about telling stories through sound, through also voiceovers and the like, and with the spaces and in the spaces I'm dealing with. And so on the one hand, of course, you can have something like a linear sound experience. So you have a story that's constructed and you listen to from A to B. Or you can go non-linear. So what Bernard and Fess were also talking about, kind of, okay, why not like use the interactive possibilities of a digital medium and let people decide what path they want to take through a story, and maybe through this interaction also change the way its story unfolds. And of course, you have this kind of location-based experience where you really explore physically a space and kind of walk through a virtual soundscape. And there are several works, some from me, some from other people, that are also inspired my thought process on this project at PdBA. One is a performance I was doing a soundtrack on called Damals 2024, so back in the days 2024. It was a performance that took place last year in Ips an der Donau, and as part of also a project called 4 Dimensions Ips. And so on the one hand, we were documenting built heritage in the city, also working with oral history, doing a lot of interviews with inhabitants, how they remember the city, how they remember events in the past, how they maybe also remember how the city sounded like. And then we were transforming that with 2 performers into a performative piece that we played in public space as well. So we started in an historic kind of gymnastics hall, and then ventured into the city on kind of an artistic guided tour, right? But what this kind of tour did was kind of changing the perspective onto the now, and kind of coming from the future and really curiously looking at what's going on. How can we perceive the city? How does the history of a building come in? And so we were working with sound in a way that all the storytelling was done by voiceovers and through like atmospheric sounds as well. And so every performer, but also every visitor was having headphones on and walking with a silent disco system, so live broadcast through that city, and experiencing the spaces, also guided by the performers, but also guided through sound. And that was one direction. Another direction where I won't play the audio now to save a bit of time is the Future Walk, which is done by Neu as part of Museum 4.0, a project in Germany for the Kulturforum. And they also played with this kind of connection with a future researcher through a fictive device where if you stand in the same space, you could get into contact with each other. And so this whole, it's also an interactive storytelling where you help this future researcher to find something out about the past and through this kind of intimate connection. And so also, yeah, playing with this, interplay with this avatar and the position you are standing at and being guided through. Also an interesting form of interaction is Augarten AR by Sonic Traces. And so they play also with this kind of location-based audio pieces for museums, but also for storytelling. They did, for example, the Heldenplatz in Wien. So here you have also a very minimalistic UI, so you don't have much distraction from your device, but it's used to basically orient yourself in space, and you meet different people in the Augarten and get in touch with historic characters. You also, through the use of spatial audio, you really have the sense of immersion that people are moving around you, that somebody is coming from behind and you turn around and you meet this person. And so really getting a story told and experiencing stories from different times, but also about the museum itself in a public space. And another really interesting exhibition I saw here when I was in Lisbon was the Evidence by Soundboard Collective and Patti Smith. And there it really gets evident that there is a strong connection through the spatial design. So you have these kind of 3 fireplaces, I would call them, within the space, and at each fireplace at a specific position where you could also sit down, you would get different stories. And so you have 3 different concept albums diving into 3 different thought worlds of authors and their travels. And so they recreated those travels and dived into those thought worlds and really laying them out in space. And so that was also for me quite inspirational to see that here in Lisbon while also working on the building itself. And so now talking a little bit about my project, Sonic Histories. So of course the starting point is the building, and it's really this question again, how to rethink, reimagine, and reinterpret a physical space through a spatial sound experience. And so here in the screenshot, that's kind of what you find in like Google geomodels as kind of 3D extractions of Google Street View. And so it's really this question, okay, you have one layer, and that is kind of the digital representation, but how can you kind of work with sound also on site and also off site, and how do you actually get that building into sound? And one approach that is also quite important for me in the work is forensic aesthetics. And so that is kind of looking at the building as kind of a time witness of lived experiences, which are then again kind of inscribed into the materiality of the building. And so this materiality and these inscriptions always need translation to be understandable again today. And so for me, sound is in a way one of those translation mediums I could use to kind of get the stories and make the stories and lived experiences heard again that are inscribed in the building. And so I'm working with this kind of architectural score. So I take the characteristics of the building, turn them into graphic scores that can then be basis for sonic experiences, as well as then the location being an anchor for sound. So thinking about how to also bring the sounds back to the building that come from the building and that come from my also, of course, own lived experience from being at the building for like 2 weeks and going there every day and closely listening to, okay, what's going on there? How do I perceive the building, and what kind of do all those cracks and the falling apart tell me me personally about it. And yeah, so how do I get that back to the building? And for me, it's also about the development of, well, a location-based AR sound experience. So I want to bring the sounds back to the building somehow and kind of anchor them. So my initial idea, which I was toying around with quite a bit, was okay, I really anchor the sounds to specific places of the building so that you can kind of, when you are at the building, walk by and kind of walk through a virtual soundscape. And so I'm now looking into this direction as well. And yeah, have people that at the building interact with the soundscape, but also thinking of different other representation versions of that as well. And for me, this kind of main quest is also to search for the core of this kind of empty building as a living organism. And for me, like the first piece I developed, the question was really, is an empty building silent, or is there still something that can be heard? How does it resonate, for example, also what's going on outside? How does it perceive as an actor also the outside world? And so this is what the first piece is also in a way about. And yeah, the visual positioning system kind of using this kind of building as a visual anchor, and that's also an interesting technology, amongst others Niantic, that did Pokemon Go back in the days as one of the first AR games. They also used like offcuts from that, mainly the photos people took from the places where they kind of found the Pokemons. They started to build the 3D world map as a community effort as well, that can now be used to situate yourself also better in the world than you could with GPS. And so that's also directly relating it back to kind of the physical building. And so what I did in my work here, I started from field recordings. And this is a lot of times part of my process. I record the ambiences of the spaces I work with. And here I did stereo recordings from the ambiences. I used the geophone to also directly get sound as it's resonating in materiality itself. And also contact microphones. And I also did some ambisonics recordings from the ambiences on site. And so these are now translated into experimental compositions and sound design, and yeah, become audible again. And as I said, music as kind of the universal language based on these architectural scores. And for me, this composition is also a translation process from these kind of collected sonic traces, and also from the traces found in the building. And I have developed during my time here several concepts, the first of which I now also developed a piece for. And I'm thinking of, on the one hand, bring it back on site, maybe as an audio AR, have something that lives on the web to be part of the website. But also, one thing that I have on my mind is also being able to perform it myself, or also being reperformed by others, to again take these traces and these kind of like architectural scores and be reinterpreted again in the future. Maybe working also with this recording material, but having this as a living kind of organism. And yeah, as I said, the first concept called silence is what I worked on so far, and I prototyped it in a completely different space, so not in at the PdBA here, but in Sweden and Malmö as part of a workshop, and used the new sonic system as kind of a 3D audio system to create this walkable sound scape. And I will show a little bit of the different bits and pieces this first piece contains of, by also using this prototype and the layout of it here. And I used this kind of real-time binaural sound, binaural rendering. So it's all on the headphones. Every visitor has a headphone system and is located in space. And the sound that can also be placed in a virtual space is then rendered binaurally, so you have a really immersive experience. And kind of what you hear now is kind of a screen grab from the software to create these spaces. And so just to walk you a little bit through the piece and how I'm thinking about this kind of sound experience. First of all, you have kind of an arrival phase where you arrive with the building and are able to connect. And so I start after an initial arriving phase also with kind of a breathing exercise with the building.
Are we able to play it? Or have we done
Yes.
before?
Is an empty building really silent?
Okay.
We tested this many times.
Breathe with me. Deep and slow.
So yeah, that is kind of the entrance into the piece. So it's really, yeah, getting connected with the building as well. And my goal is also for the visitors to kind of be able to experience the building from a different angle. And then it's also a little bit of play with perception of materiality. And that's kind of the next phase of the piece. That I try to show now.
I'm slowly falling apart, peeling my layers. Can you feel the grainy and coarse structure of the plaster?
So this part is then really about also these kind of contact mic recordings where I sonify different materialities of the building that you can find outside. And another part is then about really this kind of resonances inside the building. And so this is also what in this prototype exhibition I was putting directly into the wall. So you had to go with your ear directly at the wall and listen to the sound that came from it. And now let's listen a little bit into what these kind of resonances sound like.
Hold your ear against the wall and listen closely to what's resonating in me.
Okay, and last but not least, one more I want to show, and I only have a minute left, so is kind of the perspective. Okay, what does it actually? How does a building actually perceive its outside world? And so there I have several scenes as well from this kind of outside, well, recordings from outside ambiences that I put together in collages. And so this is one of them. The first one, a traffic scene.
There is a thin line between the inner resonance and the life outside. It can easily be crossed. Let me take you to the life outside as I hear it.
Okay.
We'll eventually have to finish here because it closes at 5. But definitely want to invite you to listen to the full piece on our Beacons page. And hopefully if you're around the building, and I hope this whole meeting kind of excited you to go and see the building yourselves. So it's at the Palácio das Belas Artes #2. And you can listen hopefully to this piece there. So I invite you to do that.
Yes. So I have the QR code now here on the screen, so you can just take a photo and find the piece. And also, otherwise, just go to the Beacon page of the event, and there you have the piece as well. So, yeah, it would be great if you like, go there, listen to it, or listen to it at home on your devices, and kind of be guided through a spatial meditation to get in touch with the building.
Thank you, Florian. Sorry to cut it short. I also think we will have some time to talk outside, and we can informally we also gather very close by here at Jardim Bombada. So if everyone wants to join us, we can exchange and maybe place our questions there. I have to finish up, so I just wanted to thank everyone for coming, and I want to thank Goethe-Institut as well, because also most of our artists came from the Culture Moves Europe program, which also is coordinated by the Goethe-Institut, and that our project, the PdBA Lisbon, is also funded by the National Directory of the Arts for the year 2024. So everything that we showed here was part of this funding. And for full disclosure, we received 25,000 euros. And with all the support from the artists in the community and the Goethe-Institut and the EU fundings that we received for these travels, we were able to do a lot more than we imagined, to show that these projects are very experimental, like I said, very small in maybe funds and shape, but they are possible. And when we think about big institutions as well, we see other constraints and other challenges, but also other potentials. So just show that there are a lot of things that we can do creatively and together. And I really thank everyone for participating, and Seth and Bernard also for putting starting this whole thing as well here in Lisbon. So thank you very much. And yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
thank to you, Leah, and to Paulina for making all of this happen. So